Welcome the anointed ones. You didn't just survive hell, you made it nervous. Let that settle in. Now imagine this. Over 60% of trauma survivors report spiritual awakenings after their deepest pain. Not therapy, not a podcast, but pain. Raw, unfiltered, character-breaking pain. That means what they used to destroy you, activated you. See, most people think when someone suffers in silence, it's because they're weak. But in your case, it was divine containment. You weren't being punished, you were being pressurized. And now that pressure is bursting into fire. The kind of fire that doesn't just burn, it exposes. And right now, God is dragging skeletons, secrets, and silent sins out like laundry on Judgment Day. Let's not sugarcoat it. They tortured you emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. Some of them did it while quoting scriptures. Some did it behind fake smiles and coffee dates. But you endured it all like a human vault, holding back the wrath of God. And now, that vault has been opened. This video is not about pity, it's about power. Not revenge, but revelation. And let's be honest, the same people who tried to set you on fire are now sweating because they smell the smoke. And it's not from you, it's from above. Oh, and quick warning, if your enemies are watching this too, they may want to keep a fire extinguisher nearby. Not that it'll help, heaven doesn't do refunds. Let's talk about the judgment they triggered when they mishandled a soul God hand-selected. Buckle up, this won't be a sermon, it'll be a spiritual autopsy. Number one, they thought breaking you would entertain their demons. They didn't just mistreat you, they enjoyed it. There's a different kind of evil that lives in people who can laugh while someone else is breaking. These weren't just people reacting out of pain or confusion. No, they were entertained by your downfall. They fed off your silence, your confusion, your exhaustion. Every time you cried, it gave them a sense of power. It made them feel like they were in control. And the most disturbing part? Some of them didn't even realize they were doing it. They were so spiritually rotten that cruelty felt like normal behavior to them, like breathing. Your pain became a show to them. You were the main character in a twisted drama they directed from the shadows. They pulled strings, planted doubts, twisted words, and watched you unravel while pretending to be innocent. But what they failed to realize is that every moment they spent mocking your downfall, God was watching. Not just watching, He was recording. They didn't know they were creating their own judgment day, scene by scene. They thought your pain was their victory. But it was actually the setup for their downfall. You weren't just crying tears. Those tears were turning into spiritual gasoline. Every insult, every manipulation, every fake smile poured more fuel onto a fire they didn't even realize they were lighting. And now, that fire is out of control. But here's the kicker. It's not touching you. It's chasing them, burning through their peace, their fake blessings, their illusion of control. They assumed because nothing happened to them immediately that they got away with it. But heaven doesn't always respond in the moment. Sometimes God lets people dig their own graves just deep enough so that when they fall in, no one can pull them out. And that's where they are now. In the grave they dug for you. They didn't just anger you, they angered God. And when God gets involved, there's no court appeal, no second chance unless repentance is real and deep. But most of them won't repent. They're too proud, too blind. So now the fire they sparked is here. And it's not symbolic, it's very real. And it's only just begun. Number two, your suffering was the legal evidence heaven needed. God doesn't move off emotion, He moves off truth. And while you were silently breaking down behind closed doors, something powerful was happening behind the veil. Every time they lied on your name, twisted your story, turned people against you, or manipulated your kindness, it was being documented, not by humans, but by heaven. What they didn't realize was that your suffering wasn't just pain, it was evidence. They thought because you weren't defending yourself, because you weren't clapping back, because you weren't exposing them, that you were powerless. But in reality, you were giving God room to build a case they couldn't appeal. A spiritual file was growing every day they chose to keep wounding you instead of repenting. They thought you were weak for staying quiet, but heaven saw it as strength. It takes more strength to stand still under pressure than to lash out in anger. And God rewards that kind of restraint, not with comfort, but with justice. They had time to change, time to apologize, time to make it right. But instead they kept digging, kept provoking, kept laughing at what they didn't understand. What looked like a delay to you was actually divine strategy. God doesn't act out of impulse. He lets it all build until the truth is undeniable, until their actions can't be spun, until their guilt reaches the point of no return. Then he moves. And when he moves, it's final. They thought they were getting away with it because life seemed to be blessing them. Their name wasn't exposed, their lies were still believed, their reputation untouched. But God wasn't letting them win, He was letting them accumulate debt, spiritual debt. And now that debt is due. They can't talk their way out of this one. They can't play the victim this time. They messed with someone heaven marked. Your pain became the very thing that convicted them. And now, the very silence they mistook as weakness is the reason their judgment is so loud. They messed with a chosen one who didn't fight back, not because they couldn't, but because heaven said, "Stand still, I got this." And now God is moving. And when He moves, there's no warning shot, just results. Number 3, they were summoning a curse by touching a living altar. You're not just a person, they didn't understand that. You're a carrier of divine purpose, a living altar walking around in human form. When people handle you carelessly, they're not just hurting someone's feelings, they're defiling something sacred. You hold spiritual weight. You carry an assignment that's bigger than looks, words, or status. So when they attacked you, it wasn't just personal, it was a spiritual violation. They didn't just cross a line, they crossed into holy territory, and now there are consequences they can't dodge. Every chosen one carries something that heaven defends. And when you were being mistreated, bullied, lied on, and dragged emotionally or spiritually, you weren't just suffering. You were being recorded as a witness. You were absorbing poison without throwing it back. You were letting yourself be crushed but refusing to turn bitter. You were taking hit after hit and still showing up with your heart intact. That level of spiritual endurance doesn't go unnoticed in the realm of the divine, so now the fire they lit to destroy you has reversed, not because you cursed them, not because you got revenge, but because God has laws. And one of them is this: you don't violate sacred things and walk away blessed. They touch something holy, thinking it was ordinary. And when people treat sacred things like common objects, God doesn't let it slide. There's a line where mercy ends and justice begins, and they crossed it thinking they were just venting or correcting or teaching you a lesson. But heaven took notes. Now the very fire they meant to consume you with is turning on them. It's showing up in their dreams, in their finances, in their relationships, in their peace. And they can't control it because they lit it with unclean hands. They played with spiritual fire thinking they were above consequences. But when the soul of a chosen one is attacked without cause, God doesn't just defend, He judges. You didn't fight back because you weren't supposed to. That silence they thought was weakness. It gave God full access. You didn't respond with your mouth, but heaven responded with fire. And now, what they started in secret is ending in full view. And this time, no apology can put it out. Number 4, their attack was not personal. It was a declaration of war against the divine. They didn't hate you for who you are. They hated you for what you carry. Your presence confronted everything they buried. Your light made their hidden darkness uncomfortable. Your authenticity disrupted their lies. And instead of facing their own wounds, they made you the enemy. But what they failed to realize is that their attack on you wasn't just misdirected anger or jealousy. It was spiritual warfare aimed at the divine assignment on your life. You weren't the target. They were lashing out at the presence of God within you, and that's where they sealed their fate. They didn't realize that hurting you was equivalent to signing a declaration of war, not with a person, but with heaven itself. The moment they touched you with cruel intentions, they entered a battlefield they weren't qualified for. This wasn't a regular conflict. It was rebellion disguised as disrespect. Every chosen one carries a divine signature, a calling that activates the environment around them. People either rise when you walk into the room or try to drag you down because they can't match your frequency. Those who chose the second option weren't just disagreeing with you. They were challenging the God who called you. And God never loses a challenge, ever. They felt threatened, not because you did anything to them, but because your life was a mirror reflecting what they gave up on. Your growth reminded them of their stagnation. Your integrity reminded them of their compromise. Your favor reminded them of their disobedience. So they tried to crush it, discredit it, and distort it, because it was easier than facing the truth. But here's the twist. When they tried to destroy you, they activated your calling. Every word spoken against you backfired. Every scheme that was meant to block you actually built you. They thought they could fight you in the flesh, while ignoring the fact that heaven was backing you in the spirit. But now the backlash isn't coming from you. It's coming from the one they really offended. They didn't just come for a person, they came for a vessel. And when you come for a vessel God chose, you lose before the battle even begins. Because it's never been about who you are. It's always been about who sent you, and that's where they messed up. Number 5, God didn't intervene immediately because he was building a case that couldn't be dismissed. You cried, you prayed. You asked God why he was letting it happen, why he didn't step in when your name was being dragged, when your character was being assassinated. When people you loved turned into enemies overnight. You weren't just hurting, you were confused. You knew God saw it all, so why didn't he stop it? What felt like delay wasn't neglect, it was precision. Heaven was watching, not passively, but strategically. Every lie told on you, every setup, every conversation behind your back was added to the case. Every moment you chose to stay silent instead of snapping. Every night you cried yourself to sleep without telling a soul. Every time you forgave and still got spit on. All of it was spiritual evidence. God wasn't just going to shut it down, he was going to prove who was who. He wasn't going to give them room to twist the narrative, because if he had responded too early, they would have played innocent. They would have lied their way into sympathy. But God waited until the evidence stacked so high it couldn't be ignored. He let them go too far on purpose, so when judgment hit, no one could say he was being unfair. And now, the case is closed, the verdict is sealed. And what's coming down isn't symbolic payback, it's real spiritual fire. A fire that doesn't just burn reputations but uproots comfort zones. It hits where it hurts. It strikes in places they thought were untouchable: money, health, influence, relationships. Because they built those things while tearing you down, and now they're finding out what it means to profit from injustice. This wasn't karma. This was court. And heaven doesn't hand out warnings once the verdict is in. You didn't have to lift a finger. Your obedience was your testimony. Your endurance was your closing argument. And now God is responding, not out of pity, but out of righteousness. Because when a chosen one is falsely handled, the delay isn't denial, it's set up. It's the gathering of receipts. And when heaven pulls the trigger, there's no hiding, no editing, no excuses. The fire has already started, not out there, but right where they thought they were safe. God is not punishing, he's correcting, and this time mercy stepped aside so justice could speak. Number 6, they didn't realize you were the test, not the target. They thought you were just another person to use, dismiss, or manipulate. To them, you were a convenience, a means to an end. Someone to lean on when things got hard, someone to blame when things went wrong, someone to mock when they needed to feel superior. They misread your presence entirely. What they didn't know was that your arrival in their life wasn't random, it was divinely scheduled. You weren't there for decoration, you were there for evaluation. God placed you in their life as a test, not a test of knowledge, but of character. How they handled you was a direct reflection of their relationship with him. Your kindness was a mirror, your patience was a gauge. Your loyalty was a challenge to their selfishness. And instead of rising to the moment, they sank. They saw you as weak when you were actually strong. They saw you as naive when you were discerning. They thought they were in control of the narrative, not realizing they were being watched, not by you, but by heaven. You were the Jonah in their storm, not because you caused the chaos, but because your presence revealed it. You were the Joseph, thrown in a pit by the very people who should have protected you. You were the Job, tested without cause and left alone to suffer in silence. And through it all, you stayed faithful. You didn't retaliate. You didn't plot revenge. You simply endured, even when it cost you everything. God wasn't watching for your complaints. He was watching for their repentance. But they never gave it. They justified their actions. They laughed off the pain. They assumed they were right just because they were loud, just because others agreed. But heaven doesn't weigh intentions. It weighs hearts. And their heart failed the test. Now God is responding. Not because you cried out for revenge, but because they failed an exam they didn't even know they were taking. They treated a divine encounter like it was disposable. And that kind of error doesn't go unnoticed. When people mishandle a chosen one, the consequence is never just about the moment. It's about the message they sent to heaven We don't value what you sent. And now the response isn't emotional, it's judicial. Number 7. The fire they lit wasn't against you. It was against their own future. They thought they were building a trap for you, but they were digging a pit for themselves and their bloodline. Every time they lied on your name, falsely accused you, manipulated your image, or prayed against your progress, they weren't just affecting you. They were laying landmines in their own future. What they set in motion wasn't a temporary scheme. It was a curse they activated over their own life, and worse, over generations connected to them. They didn't realize that when you target someone covered by God, the backlash doesn't stop with you. It spills over into your finances, your relationships, your children, your children's children. This isn't superstition, it's spiritual law. When they tried to delay your destiny by tying you down with spiritual ropes, slander, envy, word curses, they didn't trap you. Those same ropes looped back around and are now tightening around everything they care about. They didn't just sabotage their now, they compromised their later. You were never stuck. You were being prepared. But they tied themselves to a fire they thought they could control, a fire that's now burning through their peace, their stability, and their legacy. Because this fire doesn't need your hands to grow, it feeds on injustice. And the more they try to justify what they did, the hotter it gets. God doesn't play when it comes to the people he assigns to carry legacy. Your life is connected to impact, to healing, to restoration. So when they attacked you, they didn't just mess with an individual, they messed with a divine timeline. And now the system they thought they built on deception is collapsing, and they can't outrun it. They tried to destroy your future out of jealousy, but they ended up setting fire to their own. Their next move wasn't just petty, it was prophetic, because it exposed what was really inside them. And now heaven has responded. And it's not just correction, it's cleansing. Because some fires don't come to harm, they come to purify the land of wickedness. And now everything they touched with unclean motives is unraveling. Not because you cursed them, but because the fire they sparked is too wild, too divine, and too exact to be anything but judgment. Number 8. Your tears were liquid prayers that touched realms they can't access. They thought your tears were a sign that they were winning. They saw your breakdowns, your silence, your emotional exhaustion, and believed they had the upper hand. They mocked what they didn't understand. But what they didn't know is that your tears weren't just emotional reactions, they were spiritual codes. Every time you wept, every time you collapsed into prayer with nothing but pain in your chest, you were releasing messages into the spirit realm that bypassed human ears and went straight to the throne of God. You weren't falling apart. You were activating realms they have no access to. Your tears were not begging. They were commanding. They were sounding alarms in the spirit, alerting heaven to the level of injustice being committed against you. People ignored it. Friends overlooked it. Family dismissed it. But God heard. And when he hears those kinds of cries, not shallow performative cries, but soul-level weeping, he does not sit still. They laughed. They mocked. They told people you were crazy. They whispered that you were too sensitive, too emotional, or too dramatic. All the while, your tears were building a spiritual case brick by brick. You didn't know it at the time, but every sleepless night, every moment you wept with no one to call, every emotional collapse, they were sacred. They were divine alerts sent straight into the courts of heaven. Now the response is here, and it's not soft. It's not gentle, it's not even a warning, it's explosive. The kind of fire that doesn't knock first. The kind of judgment that moves in suddenly and shakes everything out of alignment. They thought your pain was powerless, but it summoned a force they can't negotiate with, a force that doesn't speak their language, a force they can't manipulate or escape. Because you weren't praying for revenge, you were crying out for justice. And justice is never quiet forever. It comes in storms, it comes in divine fire. And it comes without apology. They asked for a reaction. What they got was a response from the highest authority, not from you, but from the realm they mocked, the God they defied, and the tears they underestimated. Number 9, God gave them repeated chances to stop. They chose to escalate. They weren't blind. They weren't unaware. Deep down, they knew what they were doing was wrong. But instead of repenting, they kept going. God didn't just let them run wild, he gave them chances, real ones, quiet nudges, disturbed sleep, unexpected delays, convictions that made their stomach turn, warnings through people they didn't expect, dreams that shook them in the middle of the night. But every time they made the same choice, to ignore it, to push forward in pride, to double down on destruction. This wasn't just evil, it was rebellion. Rebellion is different from weakness. Weakness might fall into sin, feel the guilt, and try to make it right. Rebellion knows it's wrong and still says, I'm doing it anyway. And that's exactly what they did with you. They saw your kindness, they saw your silence, they saw the grace God was showing them through your patience. And they mistook it for permission. Instead of changing, they took advantage. They chose escalation over transformation, and that's where everything turned. God's grace isn't infinite when it's being spit on. There's a line, and they crossed it. Not once, but repeatedly. They were given space to repent, and they used that space to dig the hole deeper. Now it's no longer a matter of maybe they didn't know better. No, they knew, and that knowledge is exactly what's fueling the collapse. Because heaven doesn't just judge actions, it judges intentions. And their intention wasn't just to hurt you. It was to test how much they could get away with while still wearing a mask of righteousness. They abused grace until it ran dry. And now they're dealing with the reality of a decree that can't be undone. You never had to curse them. God was giving them time. But they wasted it. And when God shuts the door, it's not emotional, it's final. The fallout they're experiencing now is not your revenge, it's divine response. Not from a place of hate, but from a place of balance. Justice always catches up with rebellion. Always. They weren't pushed into this, they chose it repeatedly. And now the collapse isn't just deserved, it's unavoidable. Number 10. Your spiritual DNA activated judgment timers. You're not built like everyone else. That's the part they missed. Your presence isn't casual. It's covenant. When you walk into someone's life, heaven marks it. There are divine terms tied to your soul. And when people cross the boundaries of mistreatment with you, it doesn't just hurt your heart, it triggers systems. You're not just emotionally wired, you're spiritually timed. There's a hidden threshold built into your spiritual design, something heaven placed inside you that acts like a divine alarm. When you're pushed past a certain point of betrayal, injustice, or abuse, that threshold activates a countdown. It doesn't matter how forgiving you are, it doesn't matter if you still prayed for them. Once it reaches that spiritual tipping point, judgment begins to unfold. Not because you're vengeful, but because the weight of your calling cannot tolerate prolonged dishonor. People thought they had time. They thought your silence meant unlimited chances. They mistook your endurance for permission, but what they didn't see was the spiritual timer counting down in the background. Because every chosen one has one, it's not visible to the eye, but it's written in the fabric of your assignment. And when they keep crossing lines, even after grace has been extended, that timer goes off. And once it does, there's no going back. They were so confident in their control, so convinced you were at their mercy, but really, they were sitting on a ticking bomb, pretending it was a throne. Now it's exploding in slow motion. Opportunities are drying up, influence is collapsing, peace is being shattered. And they don't even know where it started, but you do. Because you felt it shift. You felt when the atmosphere changed. When the burden you carried lifted, not because things got better, but because judgment stepped in. And this isn't the kind of thing prayer circles can reverse. This isn't let's just move on territory. Once the timer hits zero, unless God himself steps in and grants supernatural mercy, the process begins. And it doesn't stop until justice is complete. You were never just someone they hurt. You were a divine checkpoint, a test they failed, a living reminder that grace isn't unlimited and time isn't always on their side. Number 11. The same people who mocked your pain will soon beg for your intercession. They laughed while you cried. They rolled their eyes at your breakdowns, whispered behind your back, and made you the punchline in rooms you didn't even know you were being discussed in. You were the too emotional one, the overthinker, the one who needed to toughen up. They called your pain dramatic, your boundaries disrespectful, and your loyalty desperate. But now that the fire has started to fall, not from you, but from God, they're remembering every word they spoke. And suddenly, the dramatic one looks like the only one who can reach heaven. The same mouths that mocked you will start to stutter, not because you changed, but because now the judgment they never believed in is touching their lives in places that matter. Their finances will start drying up. Their relationships will fall into confusion. Their influence will begin to rot from the inside out. They'll start to feel that same isolation they put you through, and it won't make sense to them because they still think it's a coincidence. But deep down, they'll know God is responding. And the one they violated spiritually was never just a person. They were a vault of favor and protection they broke open and wasted. And now, when they come running back, desperate, broken, hoping for your prayers, hoping for your intercession, they'll find something they never expected. You're not available, not because you hate them, not because you're bitter, but because your assignment has expired. When judgment arrives, it closes doors, it severs ties, it removes access. You didn't walk away, they got removed from your story. There's a difference. When they had your presence, they mishandled it. When they had your prayers, they took them for granted. Now that the weight of their actions has returned home, they want to lean on you spiritually like nothing ever happened. But God won't allow it, because this isn't a season of mercy through you, it's a season of consequence without you. And when they find themselves locked out of your life, they'll finally understand who they were really dealing with. Not someone weak, not someone dramatic, but someone chosen. And they mocked their miracle until it disappeared. Number 12, they wanted you powerless so they could play God. They didn't just want to hurt you, they wanted to control you. That's the part most people miss. Their behavior wasn't random, and it wasn't just about jealousy. It was about dominion. They needed you to doubt yourself, question your worth, shrink in the presence of their ego, because the more broken you felt, the more powerful they seemed. It wasn't enough for them to win. They needed you to lose your voice, your confidence, and your sense of direction so they could position themselves as the authority in your life. They weren't trying to love you, they were trying to replace God. Every insult wasn't just cruelty, it was calculated. Every guilt trip, every backhanded compliment, every emotional withdrawal was designed to bring you to a place where they could rescue you. Only after they created the storm. They wanted to be the voice you depended on, the opinion you feared, the validation you lived for, and when you started seeing through it, that's when the real attacks began, because your independence was a threat to the little throne they built on your insecurity. They wanted worship in subtle ways, you praising their wisdom, their image, their decisions, you apologizing just for existing, you playing small so they could feel big. And while others clapped for their charisma and charm, God was watching the manipulation behind the curtain. And here's the thing about God, He does not share His throne. What they were doing wasn't just abusive, it was spiritual treason. They tried to take the seat only God has in your life. And now the exposure is happening publicly. Slowly but surely, the very people they turned against you are starting to see it. The mask is slipping, the charm is cracking, and their influence is crumbling. Not by your hand, but by divine disarmament. They're being dethroned, spiritually stripped, not just embarrassed, but revealed. And there's no PR statement that can undo what God is doing, because when someone tries to play God in your life, they don't just lose your respect, they lose His protection. Now their manipulation has turned into isolation. The crown they stole has turned into chains. And the people they rallied against you, they're watching it all fall apart, wondering how they ever missed the signs. Number 13, the fire now answering them isn't from you, it's from the same God they provoked. You didn't throw a single punch, you didn't cast a spell, you didn't smear their name, expose their secrets, or even defend yourself the way you had every right to. What you did was far more dangerous to their kingdom of lies. You survived. And that survival, soaked in humility, silence, and sacred pain, became a spiritual alarm that reached the throne of God. Now the fire falling on them isn't from your rage. It's from the same God they mocked, provoked, and tested without fear. They'll cry witchcraft. They'll say you're the one doing harm because their world is falling apart. They'll throw scriptures, act confused, play victim, but the heavens are not fooled. You're not the source of the fire. You were the warning before it came. God is not a spectator in your suffering, He is a witness. And when the line of unrepented cruelty is crossed, heaven doesn't stay silent. The response isn't revenge, it's rectification. This fire isn't emotional, it's judicial. It's not personal payback, it's divine justice. You didn't have to curse them. Your pain did. You didn't have to plot, they kept provoking. And now the response is not a flame you lit, but a fire they drew with their own actions. They danced on your wounds. They laughed when they thought you were finished. But God was collecting it all, every smirk, every betrayal, every act of sabotage, and storing it like evidence in a sealed courtroom. And when God moves, he doesn't just settle scores, he reorders everything. They thought your silence was weakness, but that silence was holy. It was restraint. It was trust in a God who never misses. And now, that same silence is roaring in their lives louder than any scream ever could. What's burning down now isn't a result of bitterness, it's the consequence of unchecked wickedness. And no, not even their fake apologies, church attendance, or last-minute repentance can stop it. Because this isn't about your feelings anymore. This is about divine order being restored. God's not just protecting you, he's clearing the battlefield. And if they still think it's you lighting the match, they've misunderstood everything. The fire they're running from is holy. The judgment they feel isn't personal, it's prophetic. And there's no hiding from a God they dared to challenge through the one he chose. And number 14. They thought they destroyed you, but you were the seed, not the tombstone. They were so sure they had ended you. So sure that the smear campaigns, silent treatments, manipulation, and psychological warfare had finished the job. They watched you walk away with tears in your eyes and mistook it for defeat. But what they never understood is that a chosen one doesn't die in pain. They resurrect in purpose. They weren't burying you in a tomb. They were planting you in destiny. The betrayal didn't break you, it activated you. The isolation didn't silence you, it recalibrated you. Every lie they told became spiritual fertilizer. Every night you cried alone became sacred soil. And while they were busy celebrating your burial, the roots were quietly growing beneath the surface. You weren't gone, you were going deeper. They thought they destroyed you because they couldn't see your process. That's how it works with seeds. Nothing looks like it's happening until everything starts breaking through. And now here you are, rising, blooming, and becoming unstoppable. They thought they'd see a grave. What they're seeing is glory. Here's the twist they didn't expect. The fire they tried to burn you with, God took it and turned it into light. The same flame they used to shame you is now the one heaven uses to spotlight you. You were never the victim. You were the strategy. The enemy thought it was over, but he buried a seed that never dies. Your voice is louder now. Your energy is stronger. Your mind is clearer. And the most ironic part, their own actions watered your purpose. Every time they tried to curse you, they unknowingly spoke power into your next level, and now the same people who threw dirt on your name are stunned by the fruit growing from your life. They didn't bury a failure, they planted a legend. You didn't just survive, you expanded, and while they scrambled to make sense of it, you're walking into rooms they tried to lock, taking positions they swore you'd never qualify for, living a life that exposes their lies without you saying a single word. They thought they marked your ending, but heaven had just begun your beginning, because chosen ones don't get buried, they get rooted. And from there, the rise is not just inevitable, it's explosive. What they meant for your destruction has become divine construction. Every tear, every betrayal, every silent breakdown, they all became the scaffolding for your rise. You weren't a victim of cruelty, you were a vessel of prophecy. And now, every stone they threw has become part of the foundation God is building beneath your feet. They tortured you, but God took notes. They mocked you, but heaven recorded the footage. And now, justice is not just coming, it's already here, burning down illusions, exposing corruption, and elevating the very one they tried to erase. This wasn't just karma. It was courtroom-level judgment. Divine, undeniable, irreversible. You're not just rising, you're glowing with a fire they can't extinguish. You didn't retaliate with vengeance, you let God respond with verdicts. You were the test they failed, the seed they misjudged, the spiritual DNA they triggered without understanding what was encoded inside of you. Let them talk, let them spin their lies. It no longer matters, because the tables haven't just turned, they've flipped with fire. And in this new chapter, you're not trying to be understood. You're walking in power, not from ego, but from elevation. Not from revenge, but from restoration. You were never their victim. You were God's weapon in disguise. And now, that disguise has been removed. Let them feel the flames. Because what they lit in ignorance, heaven is now using with precision. Your survival wasn't the end of the story. It was the spark that ignited divine reckoning. The fire is here, but it's not consuming you. It's crowning you. If this message hit deep, if you felt seen, understood, and awakened, don't leave without showing some love. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a word that speaks directly to your spirit. Like this video if you know you're walking out of the fire stronger than ever. Comment below. Let us know what resonated with you most. Your voice matters here. Share this with someone who's been fighting silent battles, someone who needs to know they weren't crazy, they were chosen. This isn't just content. This is confirmation. And the world needs more of it. Let's wake up the warriors. Let's spread the fire. Stay powerful, stay protected, and I'll see you in the next one. God bless you.